Leafs fam, hockey world, what is going on? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. I'm Norman James. How are you listening to us? On Anchor, iTunes, Radio Public, YouTube. However you're consuming this product, thank you so much for doing it. Well, Tavares watch is all said and done. The Leafs get their man. The next time we watch Tavares do his thing, he'll be putting on his jersey, getting onto the ice, ripping it up with his new line mates. Oh, we're going to Tavares watch this team destroy most of the league, and I cannot wait. Mike Augello is standing by. He and I will wrap things up and tie it with a bow when it comes to John Tavares and the Maple Leafs acquiring him, and we'll look ahead to the players the Leafs need to acquire to help bolster this incredible roster. Mike's ready to go. I'm ready to go. You're ready to go. Let's Leafs Convo right now. Mike Augello. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Norman. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm still dealing with the hangover post John Tavares signing with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I'm feeling pretty good about this hangover. You?
Yeah, I know Leaf fans are sort of basking in the glow of success, and I can completely understand that. And I have to say it's going to be a trip to cover this team next year with all the talent there. But I reflect on what Kyle Dubas said after the signing. He was very careful in sort of doing a victory lap, because I think he more than anybody realizes that he still has work to do, and that's where I think this team is going to go the next couple of weeks, is improve on their chances and bolster where they need to bolster to make this team a Stanley Cup contender.
Kyle Dubas has been so impressive. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James, Mike Augello. When you are the top dog, when you are the biggest team on the block, the most powerful hockey franchise on the planet, you don't need to do a victory lap. You do not have an inferiority complex. Kyle Dubas is the right guy to run this franchise. He's been fantastic. Hand over his shoulder, offering him advice. Mike, your latest for HockeyBuzz.com, getting a lot of attention. Is Leafs' next step moving Matt Martin? We can talk about John Tavares later in the podcast. We're going to talk about John Tavares in multiple podcasts going forward. But let's talk about right now the crux of your latest article for Hockey Buzz. Let's Matt Martin. Is there any significance here to him being potentially traded to the Rangers, where his father-in-law is located in New York? Is there any significance here contractually that makes any difference in terms of what the Leafs might be trying to do elsewhere in emboldening the roster?
Well, I mean, he's got a $2.5 million cap hit, and remember, he was assigning Lou Lamoriello not to lower the value of Matt Martin, but at the end of the year last year, after the All-Star break, he played 3 games. He played 3 games against the Buffalo Sabres, and that was it. So clearly Babcock has moved on to playing the skilled guys, the young guys like Andreas Janssen and Kasperi Kapanen in third, fourth line roles. And I just don't know whether there is going to be a role for Matt Martin going forward. He was very important in terms of team building. He established himself as a leader in the locker room and a friendship with Mitch Marner, but it all has to do with being on the ice. And I just don't know, even with Bozak and Komarov and Van Riemsdyk leaving the organization, whether Matt Martin is going to step in. Now, he's a $2.5 million cap hit. $1.5 million of that was signing bonus that was paid on July 1st. So wherever he goes, it's a $1 million salary that's owed to him with a $2.5 million cap hit. The Rangers have a lot of cap room, and I made a connection in my recent column. Mm-hmm. His girlfriend is Sydney Esiason, who's the daughter of Boomer Esiason, a big Ranger fan who's a former NFL quarterback and now a morning radio host on WFAN in New York. It would sort of make a lot of sense, being, he played with the Islanders. The Rangers were in on Ryan Reeves. Couldn't get him signed. They were in on Leo Komarov. They're going through sort of a rebuild, and they probably want somebody with a physical aspect to their game who could protect some of their younger players. So I think it fits. And James Myrtle, the Athletic, floated it out there yesterday that, the Rangers were a possibility. And I just think, I think he will be moved out, but simply not because he's not a good player, but I think that they need that cap room, that $2.5 million to apply it elsewhere, which is obviously their defense.
Mike, you gave us the biography on Boomer Esiason, but you left out the most important detail. What's his first name?
Norman.
Bingo! Come on, Mike. So the Rangers could use a little bit of a heftiness to help out their forwards, help out their team, and Matt Martin if he were to go there. So who replaces Matt Martin on a Maple Leafs team that some would say needs a bit of protection?
I don't know that there will be somebody to replace him in terms of that role, because that role is sort of being phased out. There were teams. I mean, the two teams that made the finals last year, you had Tom Wilson, who was a bull in a china shop, and you had Ryan Reeves, who's basically a fourth liner, but did have an impact. And I think that is a shortcoming of the Leafs if they do trade Matt Martin. But it's clear that Matt Martin doesn't seem to be in the mix anymore, and I think that they have better ways to allocate that $2.5 million cap space that would be vacated if he is moved. So I think that's the direction they're going.
Part of your article on HockeyBuzz.com, a report was it David Pagnotta mentioning that the Leafs were pursuing Calvin DeHaan, free agent defenseman with the New York Islanders. Wouldn't that be a double whammy for Lou and that ailing fan base? Boy, oh boy, are they taking it hard, and to a degree, rightfully so. What do you know about Calvin DeHaan? Is he a guy that the Leafs could put in there and look at their fan base and say, hey, you know what, we brought you John Tavares, we couldn't get you Shea Weber, but we got you Calvin DeHaan. Would that be palatable?
I mean, I think he's a good defenseman, but obviously with the free agent class being as thin as it was, I mean, he's getting a lot more attention and a lot more lengthier and more richer offers than, in my estimation, I would be interested in a team signing him for. I mean, he played I think 33 games last year, had a shoulder injury, so his season was shortened. And he's a good defenseman, but is he a top 4 defenseman? I don't know, and I don't particularly think so. So I would hesitate if the Leafs are having to offer him a 3 or 4 year deal at over $4 million, which is what it may take. And I know that he's buddies with Tavares, and maybe he wants to come to Toronto, but I don't know if it's worth that kind of investment. If they do that, then I really question the future of Jake Gardiner and maybe Nikita Zaitsev, because if they sign Haan for that kind of amount, they have to move salary out going forward. And I just don't know which avenue they will explore that way.
Trading off Jake Gardiner for Calvin DeHaan, is that acceptable? I mean, are these two guys on the same level of prowess and skill? Mike, I know one plays a different type of game than the other, but if you were to say we brought in John Tavares and Calvin DeHaan, but we lost Jake Gardiner, that's not going to sit well with a lot of people.
No, I mean, Gardiner is a much better offensive player than DeHaan is as a two-way player. But you have to realize, and this is the thing that Dubas is probably calculating. Now, he spoke to Pat Brisson, the agent for Gardiner, at the NHL draft. I'm certain that he would have gotten some sort of idea of what it would cost to sign him to a contract extension, which he can sign after July 1. But the 2019 defensive market, Yarmulson signed a 2-year extension. Doughty. Carlson now has permission to talk to a number of teams, and more than likely he's going to be traded and sign an 8-year extension. So he's off the market. Ryan McDonough, Ekman Larson, I mean, Doughty, all these guys have signed contracts. The number one, potentially in a couple weeks, the number one free agent on the market in terms of a defenseman for 2019 could be Jake Gardiner. And that's going to be a problem because, the potential is there. If he puts up another 50-point season, he could make $7 million a year in free agency. And I don't think the Maple Leafs are paying $7 million a year for a one-way defenseman. And that's the concern that they have. And they cannot repeat the same problem that they did last year by keeping Van Riemsdyk and keeping Bozak and then losing them for nothing in free agency.
Well, Jake Gardiner has an appeal to a certain crowd within the Leafs fan base that is totally analytics driven, and that's fine and dandy. But at some point, you're going to have to cut bait with these players a lot of people have used as examples of a player who doesn't get a fair shake based on the eye test compared to what is happening statistically, because these guys, if they are that good, are going to have to get paid, and you're already committed to $77 million for number 91, and then William Nylander is going to have to get paid. And again, we have to wrestle with love and admiration for the player and compare that to how we feel and what we're ready to accept, how we feel about the team and what we're ready to accept the team to do as it tries to progress forward to winning a Stanley Cup. It's impossible in this day and age to keep all of your high dollar players simply because of the salary cap. So guys like Jake Gardiner and, dare I say, William Nylander may be expendable down the line, considering the team's salary situation. And, I know there are ways to not necessarily circumvent the rules, but to jimmy them a little bit and to do some creative accounting. But the team also has to ask itself whether it's all worth it in the end, or if it's just better to trade away these guys that a lot of fans have fallen in love with to accrue assets and good stuff in return, while having to bite the bullet on the PR nightmare that is impending if you do remove guys like Nylander and Gardiner from the mix, Mike.
Well, it's all asset management, and this is the thing. If you look, for example, the McDonough deal that Tampa Bay made, they traded a couple young prospects. They traded Nemestikov in the deal to get JT Miller back, but it was first and second round draft picks and two prospects. If you get back value for Jake Gardiner, if you've determined that you can't sign him or he wants more than you're willing to pay, then you get assets back in terms of futures. And then you can trade those assets for somebody else who is either under control, or you can sign for what you think he's worth. So, I mean, it's all a question of moving in and moving out. Now, if they can get Gardiner signed for a reasonable salary, then they'll probably do it. But if they can't, then you cannot let that player walk away for nothing, especially a defenseman, because there will be value there. And that's why I think it's imperative that the Leafs improve their defense this year. And if they can't sign Gardiner, and even if they trade him, their defense is good enough to make a playoff run.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James with Mike Augello. Arguably the biggest free agent signing in league history has been committed by the Toronto Maple Leafs willing partner, John Tavares. It's a beautiful thing. And Mike, I mentioned this when we did our Canada Day episode, that I'm relieved because a lot of the Leafs Convo visually on YouTube is dedicated to what John Tavares might do. It's the buildup. And can you imagine 12 to 15 podcasts focused on John Tavares and his big decision with the creative thumbnails and his picture plastered all over the YouTube page, and we get to July 1st and he joins the Dallas Stars? I was thinking of a way to paste over a lot of those thumbnails with just generic Leafs Convo images and stuff like that. But thankfully, I don't have to do that going forward. Now, back to Jake Gardiner. It wouldn't make sense to have him on this team contributing or not contributing, being a big part of it, being a tertiary contributor, and then get to the trade deadline with the Leafs 10 points up on everyone or in a battle for the President's Trophy, and then trade him because there's a belief that they're not going to be able to sign him in free agency, which would be looming anyway. So now's the time to trade him if you're not going to keep him, right?
Agreed. I mean, I can't if they get to late February when the deadline comes and they're in first or second place in the Atlantic Division and they think they have a great chance of making a run for the Cup. Yeah, they're going to keep him, and then they're going to if they can't fit him in financially, then they're, with their focus being on re-signing and extending Marner and Matthews, then he will leave and he will go where he gets paid. And that, to me, that's like a worst case scenario. I'm not saying, they're looking to trade him for absolutely nothing. This is the time of year where you can make a hockey deal. And there are teams out there, say, for example, the Minnesota Wild, who have, Matt Dumba as an RFA, who they may not want to extend for what he's looking for, but maybe that amount is more palatable to the Leafs. And, you have Gardiner, who's a Minnesota native. Now, this is not a rumor. I haven't heard anything, but I'm just, spitballing here. And if that's a possibility, and I believe Dumba's a right-hand shot, that would be a better fit for the Leafs than Gardiner for 1 year and walking away. But in the short term, I really think what's going to happen, and I mentioned a couple names in my latest column, I think the distinct possibility here is, and Dubas mentioned this on Sunday, there have been veteran players who, after seeing John Tavares sign, are saying, okay, I'll take a 1 year deal. I'll take a short-term deal to come to Toronto because we have a chance. Yeah. They have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. And one of the names that I saw still unsigned was Dan Hamhuis, a veteran defenseman who played for Dallas last year, scored 24 points, played for Babcock in Sochi on the 2014 Team Canada Olympic team. And I think that that's a player that if they can get on a 1 year deal for a couple $1 million, that solidifies their blue line a little bit. It makes it even better.
So is he another age-wise, sage-wise, but also declining ability-wise, Ron Hainsey? Are you going to look at it and say, well, you can't expect Dan Hamhuis and Ron Hainsey to carry the day for a team that expects to win 16 games in the spring?
No, but he averaged 20 minutes with the Stars. He's not over the hill. He, like I said, he scored 24 points. You're talking about making your 1 through 6 more deep and more solid, and that I'm saying he could be a bottom pairing guy along with a Justin Hall or Travis Dermott, and it provides that experience. And if in the absence of being able to get a top 4 defenseman, the only thing that you can do is make your 1 through 6 more solid. Okay,
so Dan Hamhuis would be an option if Calvin DeHaan isn't a guy that the Leafs spend money on, or do you think you bring in Calvin DeHaan for whatever it is, $4 million per? I don't know what the length of the deal would be, and then add Dan Hamhuis if he's not signed by mid-August or something like that on a sweetheart deal.
I would be surprised that in the end the Leafs get DeHaan simply because I think that it's going to end up having to be a long-term deal. Yeah. And as I said, I think that if it's a long-term deal, then they're going to have to move things around, and a guy like Zaitsev or a guy like a Gardiner would have to move out because they have to clear space 2 or 3 years down the road. So that's why I think they're waiting for, Dermott will make the team next year. They're waiting for Liljegren. I think he needs another year in the American Hockey League. And what they're going to do if they can't get that top 4 defenseman that they've been looking for the last couple of years, they're going to stop gap with veterans. And a guy like Hamhuis is still, he's 35 years old. He's still got something left. And I think that would be a short-term plug that would work.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James along with Mike Jello, John Tavares in the fold. So Tavares' watch is over for now, but I'm sure Tavares' watch will evolve into something else, whether it be his first time on the ice, his wearing the jersey, Tavares' watch on which line he's going to be on, Tavares' watch if he gets injured. So the first round of Tavares' watch is done. We'll have to see where the second round of Tavares' watch takes us. But, the Leafs Convo will certainly be front and center. Mike, before we wrap up, I see a lot of speculation on Erik Karlsson and his future in Ottawa. Is there any relation to the Maple Leafs here at all?
I would find it hard to believe. I know that Mike Trakos, who a reporter I respect, was sort of theorizing, if the Leafs offered, say, William Nylander a first round pick and something, would that be enough? And the thing is, I think that Ottawa will trade with anybody other than the Leafs. The last thing they want to do is help the Leafs.
I know.
So I don't.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Mike.
no, I think that the last team that they will help is Toronto. So I think they'll trade him anywhere else other than the Leafs.
Is Ottawa in a position to be that vindictive right now? I mean, this franchise is circling the toilet bowl in more ways than one.
Well, I mean, the roadmap for that, to answer your question, is the Mike Hoffman deal. They traded Mike Hoffman to San Jose for the best return that they could get, which was not much, because other teams in their own division were inquiring about Hoffman, namely the Florida Panthers, who they asked for a lot more in the deal, and then simply Doug Wilson sent Hoffman to Florida and got more in return than he gave up for Hoffman from Ottawa. So, I mean, there is an Atlantic Division tax when it comes to Ottawa. Yeah. They will trade with teams, but they'll expect a lot more. And I don't think that you're going to see a situation where Carlson goes to one team and then goes to Toronto. They can't prevent him from going to Toronto, but he's got the control of the situation. He will only approve a deal to someplace where he wants to go. And I don't think that's going to happen where the Leafs are involved here.
Yeah.
And I think that, Ottawa will not trade with Toronto. It just won't happen.
Yeah. In theory, I understand there's a rivalry there, clearly. But Ottawa is not in the same league as the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. And for years, it was the other way around. Ottawa really doesn't have a leg to stand on if it's choosing not to take a good deal, because the good deal would involve making an arch rival that much better. Ottawa should be stripped down and rebuilt. And I think the Montreal Canadiens are sort of in that same situation. I know they do have some good players in the fold, but like these organizations, they can't operate with this vindictive pulse when they are scraping the bottom of the barrel or potentially in a position to be in the mix for a lottery pick. Well, Ottawa is a beggar. It's not a chooser. And if you were able to imagine that Nylander, a first-round pick, and another prospect for Carlson, who's probably you can't afford and probably wants to get the hell out of there anyway, but you don't want to do it because the Leafs are involved in the deal. What do you care? You're going to get flattened 5-6 times this coming season. Just bite the bullet. The Leafs have been biting the bullet for 50 years, for God's sake. Just do it. And if you can't, sorry, Mike, and if you can't operate like a professional, shut the damn franchise down.
The strange thing is that a couple of years ago, Ottawa was the main competitor in the province of Ontario with the Leafs. The Leafs were wallowing at the bottom of the league, and they traded Dion Phaneuf to Ottawa. And the reason they did was because it was beneficial to them. They cleared Phaneuf's $7 million contract, and for whatever 5 or 6 years that was left on it, and it was beneficial to them. Now with Ottawa, it's beneficial to trade Carlson and get as much as you can for him before he walks in free agency. And trust me, if he doesn't get traded this offseason, he's walking in free agency next year.
If I'm a Senators fan, I'm a bit worried about the competence level of the people making decisions there. Mike, we got to go.
Thanks, Norman.
Yeah, Ottawa, what a joke right now. It's too bad, but you know what? You got a deal. The Leafs have dealt with some really terrible periods over the last 50-plus years. Now it's Toronto's time. Ottawa's going to have to figure itself out, or who knows, that franchise could be out of the capital city. Read Mike's latest at hockeybuzz.com. The guy's one of the best. I'm very honored to have him riding shotgun on this project that is the Leafs Convo. 24 hours left to get your Leafs Convo tee. You hear me going on about it? It's legit, and we need you to support our work. We really appreciate it. It'll only take us to the next level if you do. $20 plus shipping. Bonfire.com/TLC-gear. Go ahead and get yourself a TLC OG t-shirt. This is the first running of TLC apparel. We're going to be putting out more in the days, weeks, and months ahead. It's all about helping to build our brand, take it to the next level, and you're going to help us do that. I'm also trying to set up a bit of an email list for people who are interested in finding out what else is on the menu when it comes to the Leafs Convo podcast and the things we have planned. If you want to get on that email list, theleafsconvo@gmail.com. Send me an email. I'll add you to the queue. I'll add you to the list, and you will be the first to know when something's going down. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. Thank you so much for listening to the Leafs Convo. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.